talked to Stop AMP advocate and Nashville businessman Lee Beeman in the first part of the show. Now we have AMP Yes supporter and Nashville Chamber executive Ralph Schulz joining us. Ralph, thanks for coming on Inside Politics.
Great to be with you, Pat.
Now, the Chamber's been one of the major leaders in the AMP Yes coalition. You and a number of community leaders have said repeatedly the AMP is what we need to do, and you've backed both the AMP design and its route. So are your coalition members a little disappointed the mayor's now kind of backing up and changing things?
No, actually, we think it's a great time to bring people around the table and have the discussion. I think the mayor's emphasis on engineering information he now has and community feedback he has now received makes it a great time for people to be sitting around the table and talking about this issue at the same table. So I think we're actually encouraged by the fact that it's taken this step.
You're not having to re-energize any of your members and get them pumped back up to continue?
No. People are engaged in this because they believe it's a necessity for the community.
Now, with these changes along the route and the design as well, how do you keep this from continuing to be a single project and not a bunch of different mass transit projects that just happen to be backed up against each other?
Well, I think first of all, the mayor and the FTA are looking at it as one project. I think the citizens group that the mayor is putting together is really looking at features along the project, and I think it's study and commentary that's going to be taking place. There's still a lot of decisions to be made about this project by the professionals that are engaged in it.
So the AMP Yes coalition is going to continue to exist and move forward?
Sure. There's still going to be an education need in the community about transit, and frankly, even beyond this project, there's going to be a need for that.
Now, do you see AMP Yes as having some kind of representation on the Citizens Advisory Committee? Will you be going to those meetings? Will your group be involved in representing your points of view or in getting out information about those meetings?
Well, first of all, our belief is that there'll be public meetings, so obviously our supporters who will be in touch with us will know about those meetings. But the mayor has said he's going to gather everybody around the table, and we'd expect there'd be somebody from our group there.
And given what you've said, was this a little bit overdue for the mayor? Wouldn't it have been better to start this out in the first place rather than sort of coming out with pretty advanced design and a route already selected, and then saying, oh, let's get everybody buy-in, then instead of trying to get that buy-in in advance?
I think anytime you get community engagement, you're going to be good. I mean, there have been community meetings along the way. There have been other meetings along the way. I think that we're just at a point in time where we know enough to know what the items of discussion ought to be. So I think the timing is good.
Well, in that regard, I think you're aware there are other issues that are been talked about in terms of design, in terms of the narrowness of streets, in terms of the slope of some of the roads, in terms of ADA compliance. Is this something that the designers, and for that matter the Citizens Committee, ought to go ahead and look at as well, since we're looking at all these other things in terms of dedicated lanes and things like that? Should we just get it all on the table and deal with it?
Well, I think the committee is going to be taking up topics that the engineering and design indicates they need to take up. So I don't know what's going to be on the agenda. Maybe some things that haven't been talked about will be a part of the agenda. I just don't know what that agenda is going to be.
Well, one that was never talked about that much publicly, but early on, the route for this downtown was going to be down 2nd Avenue, not 5th. Is that another one that you think maybe ought to be looked at?
I think if it's within the FTA guidelines, I think that it can be an item of discussion, but I think the key is it part of the FTA guidelines? Because they're a $75 million investor at this point.
Now, let's also talk about the route going out from downtown. There was talk originally about wanting to have this over on Charlotte. The word always came back that Charlotte wouldn't work. West End was really the only route that the federal government would approve for this. Is that still the case? Are we still talking about whatever we do, whether it's bus rapid transit or the AMP down the center of the lane thing, is it going to have to be on West End?
From our perspective as pro-AMP advocates, it makes most sense to put rapid transit in the densest part of this region and put it in a place where there are destinations more people want to go to. So from our perspective, what's been Nashville's Main Street for 150 years, it makes a lot of sense to have rapid transit along that corridor. It's going to be the most popular place for cars as well, so you've got to provide alternatives that are going to mitigate the explosion of cars that's going to take place on that route over the next few years.
Now, we had Lee Beeman in your chair here in the first part of the show. I asked him about continuing to push the bill in the General Assembly, which would completely ban any kind of AMP center design, lane design. He says he's going to continue to push that to try to get it passed. He'd like the committee and the designers to get rid of it completely along the route, but he's going to push that bill. And what's your reaction to that?
We're going to continue to encourage legislators to support the House language that exists right now, because what it really does is it codifies a good process where local government can determine how it manages its growth, but it's working in concert and partnership with TDOT and then the state legislature if funding is requested.
Now, Lee Beeman says we just ought to get rid of the center design lane completely, where you don't have that, you don't have dedicated lanes at all, you just do it all as bus rapid transit light. He says that would be safer, it would be cheaper, and would work just as well, if not better, than the AMP. What do you say?
Well, first of all, we already know from looking at the alternatives, it's the most cost-effective means. When you look at it from a safety
perspective, the AMP is more cost-effective.
The AMP is more cost-effective. Secondly, when you look at safety, last year 3 million miles of BRT and only 9 injuries in that 3 million miles on a nationwide basis. It's a safe method of transportation. But more than anything, if you want people to ride it, it's got to have predictability, it's got to have frequency, it's got to have speed.
It doesn't have that with rubber wheel buses.
Well, it's gonna have that with a dedicated lane. It's gonna have that when it has the opportunity to move through traffic in an uninhibited way. So that's gonna bring the comfort, and it's gonna bring the speed that allows people to rely on it day in, day out, and time in and time out. You'll see, we've already seen the ridership increase on other routes when you made those routes faster and more predictable.
But none of those are AMPs. They're all bus rapid transit light.
They're bus rapid transit light, but in this high density corridor with the destinations people want to get to, more people are going to use it as an alternative because they know when they're going to leave, they know when they're going to get there, and they know they're going to get there fast.
You've been a little critical of one of the outside groups, or one of the groups that people perceive as an outside group, Americans for Prosperity, being involved in this. They say they have a Tennessee presence here and that AMP is a state and local issue for them. Well, you say they're outsiders that are telling us what to do.
Rather than being critical, basically what I've said is that the people who support our coalition all live here, they all drive here, they all transit here. They're people that are actually living with the decisions that are being made. So I think they should have greater weight in the conversation.
Now, the changes the mayor made, in some ways, he was almost forced into that politically. I mean, the area he's taking off of the dedicated lanes is where at least one of those areas is the hottest amount of opposition to it. The one at I-40 going down to Broad and West End, there were probably just logistical problems of going across that bridge, right?
You know, I think as we go through this process, and it's a transformative process, as you know more answers, as you know more options, it's a great time to involve the public. So I think we've always said that as we knew more people would be engaged in the conversation because you had real decisions to make. You had information to fuel those decisions.
Now, the AMP legislation in terms of banning those center lanes is one of many pending bills that you've had concern, the Chamber's had concern of, as state government exerts its power over local governments on social issues, on schools, on guns in parks, lots of different things. So what's wrong with that? I mean, local governments are subject, and its power is coming from the state legislature. Where is that overstepping its line or the boundaries, in your opinion?
Well, I think the people who live here should be making decisions that most affect their lifestyle. And so when you're looking at things like the establishment of transit, when you're looking at specific street corners, specific routes, the people who live here are the people that are going to have be most impacted by that decision. So that's where you really want the engagement. Quite honestly, it's hard for the legislature to be informed of the intricacies and the nuances of the local environment as they undertake statewide issues.
We've got about a minute left. How critical is this mass transit debate? The mayor looks like he stumbled a bit on this. Are you concerned now that the other political leaders are going to be a little bit reticent to step forward and get shot on this particular?
Look, Look, I think this is an evolutionary debate. I think as long as the community's continuing to talk about it and the professionals are providing the answers, the critical thing is we've got a population that's growing, we've got jobs that are growing, we have more people and less space. We've got to find a way to provide transit alternatives that people can use and they can depend on.
Ralph Schulz, thank you so much for coming down. I'm sure we'll continue to monitor and see how the things go with the AMP.
Pat, such a pleasure to be here.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics. Hope you can be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.